Amy Walters, who's an analyst for Cook Political Reports, and one we've had on this show as well, pointed out something on Twitter over the weekend that I thought was both interesting and hilarious and also actually really predictable. So Biden's favorability ratings have been increasingly going up over the course of this campaign, and her commentary here is the attacks on socialism and Sleepy have not only not moved numbers away from Biden, but Biden's actually gotten more popular since the summer. So all of the calling him a socialist has apparently actually backfired at a time when people are like, first of all, no one buys it. But second of all, you're like, oh my God, maybe he's going to give me health care. We can't have that.
I don't think anybody thinks Joe Biden is a socialist. And what have we been saying here from the very beginning? It's not an effective attack. People don't believe it. In some cases, people actually want to go back to sleep.
Sleepy is like, yes, let's be able to sleep at night again.
I have said it. It's so easy. I think that if you go and you look at the fact that he had a -10 favorability rating in January, what was the discussion in January?
Social Security,
Iraq, and Hunter, and Burisma. It's not hard, folks. Like, you go after him for his 40-year record being a tool of the globalist establishment, returning us to an era of corrupt politics where everybody appeared nice and smiley on the outside, was robbing you blind whenever they were behind closed doors. Once again, this is the easiest message in history. Joe Biden is not just an inherently likable guy. It would be very easy to drive up his negatives into the 20s and the 30s. I'm not saying it's going to be just as easy as Hillary was. There's nobody like Hillary, but you could still do it. I mean, you could paint him at, like I said, with Hunter, with Social Security, Iraq. I haven't actually heard Trump attack Biden on Iraq one time. I'm trying to think about in terms of the rallies and the debates and the things I've watched. He might have mentioned it offhandedly, but it has not been a central part of his campaign. Same thing whenever it comes to Social Security. I mean, the only hits that they like to have are on criminal justice. But again, it doesn't make any sense. They're like, oh, like super predators, all this stuff. But we're also the party of law and order. You got to pick one. I choose law and order, by the way.
Not to mention, that attack was tried out on Joe Biden early in the Democratic primary. And look, it's something I care a lot about. It didn't really land. It didn't ding him. The attacks that worked the most effectively was for the 1 minute when the Sanders campaign actually followed this strategy of talking about trade. I think the Social Security, I mean, we covered closely some of the polling at that time, was really undercovered by the media, but the Sanders campaign was going after him on his comments. They had that C-SPAN footage that David Sirota pulled up of Biden saying, I wanted to cut Social Security, not once, not twice. That was actually pretty damning for him because it reminded people that this has been a guy who has gone along with the fiscal austerity, who has been part of the problem in Washington. And occasionally we see that rhetoric coming out of Trump. But number one, look, I think the landscape has just obviously radically shifted since January, and the issues that are on people's minds are a little bit different. But number two, they've just decided to roll out this standard issue Republican playbook that, look, we tried to tell y'all from the beginning wasn't going to work out. And not only did it work out, it ultimately backfired. And that's reflected in the fact that you have polling coming out over the weekend. In every single instance, it looks devastating for Trump. You had an NBC Wall Street Journal poll. This was of registered voters, which it is weird that they're not using likely voters yet. But this is the widest margin that they've had in this poll. 14 points with Biden significantly up, over 53%. We had New York Times Siena poll come out, a couple battleground polls there, Pennsylvania showing Biden with a 7-point edge. Saagar, something we've been talking about here, if you're going to pay attention to one state, pay attention to Pennsylvania. If Biden wins, he is very likely to be the president. If Trump wins, he is very likely to be the president. It's a state that has stayed a little bit closer than Michigan and Wisconsin. So it seemed like a place where maybe the Trump campaign could make a final stand. But, look, that poll has a significant margin of error. But if you're looking at a 7-point lead or anything approaching that in Pennsylvania, you're in really bad shape.
Yeah, I know exactly. And you can actually look in other states. Florida, we also have, let's throw that up there on the screen, 47 and 42. Now, actually, I think Trump is probably in better shape in Florida than he is in Pennsylvania. Ironically, because of the large non-white voting population in Florida, Trump is doing a lot better amongst Hispanics and non-white voters than he does amongst white voters. But I want to make that
compared to 2016.
Compared to 2016. But that's important because there are actually a lot of white voters which he needed to win and win back, as he did in 2016 in the Midwest, in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, Ohio. We also have Ohio here, which is tied according to this poll. I mean, it should not be a tied vote. This should be blown out of the water. We shouldn't even be thinking about Ohio. And so, look, if Biden was really up by 14 points, then he'd be campaigning in places like Kansas. I don't think anybody thinks that Joe Biden is going to win 14, had 14 points. But Trump's approval rating right now is around 42%. Last time around, he won with 46% of the vote. This time, I think he'd have to be around 47 in order to definitively win against somebody like Joe Biden, who doesn't have as high negatives as Hillary Clinton. And we just don't see it. Look, like I said, I think it's very simple. You could drive up Joe Biden's negatives. The fact that his positives have gone up since January is insane. It's completely insane. And it doesn't need to be this way. You could have, that minus 10, I think it could be minus 25 if they had a real concerted attack against him. But they haven't been able to find a coherent thing or case against Joe. And you can see that also in the lack of coherent case for Trump himself.
Trump people will tell you, like, well, he wasn't very popular when he won in 2016 either. His unfavorability ratings are about the same. True. The difference is that Joe Biden is a lot more popular than Hillary was at this time. And I have to think, I have to go back and look at the data, but I have to think that it is extraordinarily unusual for a candidate's favorability to actually gain over the course of a political campaign. Just because of the nature of campaigning and how ugly it gets. I did go back and look at Hillary's. At the beginning of 2016, her unfavorable rating was 5 points higher than her favorability, so she was minus 5. By the end, she was minus 12 because they had a very effective line of attack on her, whether you thought it was fair or not. It certainly landed with the public. This time around, it is the exact opposite. Biden with doing very little just because of how poorly the Trump campaign has managed, how poorly Trump himself has handled the, coronavirus pandemic. I really think that there's kind of like a comparison here that's going on that's not favorable for Trump and is favorable for Biden as well, has led to Biden actually improving his favorability. It's just kind of an amazing state of affairs. All right, well, I have more Rising for you after this.